Welcome to the Women Leaders Association Daily Member Podcast, where we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. I'm your host, Julianne Kirkland. And in each Daily Member Podcast, we will pick out a great speaker from one of our meetings that we thought you would enjoy. You can access hundreds of recent speakers, book summaries, great articles, and more at no additional charge through your membership portal. If you would like to get involved in a Women Leaders Association mastermind group or find a networking group near you, or if you just need access to the membership portal, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com to be connected. Now let's tune in for this incredible message.
So a bit about me, I've basically made it my mission to help empower women financially, personally, professionally. I have over 20 years in financial services, started my career at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York in bank supervision, went on to work for the chief credit officer at Fannie Mae for several years, spent the bulk of my career at American Express, where I started in risk and information management, progressed my career, moved over to compliance, and ended up as a VP of the consumer line business operational excellence. Empowering women is near and dear to my heart for so many reasons. I'm a mom of three, ages 9, 5, and 2, a boy and 2 girls. And so talking about professional empowerment, career advancement, personal empowerment, and financial empowerment certainly is, again, very near and dear to my heart. And for the past year, I've been the vice president of consumer compliance and head of global compliance at a fintech by the name of Affirm. So that's a bit about me. Next slide, please. So what do I mean when I say high achieving? I think of it kind of in terms of 5 components that I think go into truly being a high achieving leader or high achieving woman in the workforce. I'm going on the premise that everyone who's here, just looking at the illustrious panelists we've had and speakers we've had so far, is accomplished, has reached a certain level in her career. So I'm going to kind of put that to the side for purposes of defining high achieving and talk about these next 5 elements. Next slide, please. So firstly, you are functioning to your highest potential in a sustainable way, and then emphasis on sustainable, particularly when I think of my own career. I have had a tendency to kind of, go out of the gate blazing, ready to make an impact. And then only to find 6 to 9 months later, I'm burnt out and rather stressed. And so functioning to your highest potential, but in a sustainable way. So second, you are achieving and accomplishing what you set out to do. Third, you are making an impact and inspiring those around you to do the same. And this, to me, is such a key element of leadership generally. It's not, simply telling people what to do. It's actually making an impact and really raising the level of how people operate in your organization. And then 4, you are feeling fully empowered in your professional life, and again, are empowering others. So making that impact to others, whether it be your peers, colleagues, leaders, or folks on your team. And then finally, you are living in alignment with your personal values and professional values for that matter, which we'll talk about a bit more in a couple of slides. So let's talk about kind of on a summary basis, what are those 5 key themes? Next slide. So some of these things, funnily enough, we've talked about, the panelists have talked about, Lisa talked about earlier in her keynote. But to summarize, my 5 key themes are be real, so authenticity. Secondly, knowing your value system, which I talked about a little moment ago, and we'll talk about some more. Leading with empathy, which Lisa talked about, but also compassion. It's kind of the next generation of leadership springing forth from leading with empathy. Fourthly, being a collaborative problem solver along with your team, which I'll talk about. And then finally, promoting a culture of recognition, which may or may not be what you think it is. I mean, obviously there are financial incentives that leaders can give to their teams, but there are other ways of recognizing a team and the work of a team, which are just so important. So first, be real, which is essentially authenticity. And just to step back a bit, the reason I call this being real is inspired by the Velveteen Rabbit. So for those of you who are familiar with that story, the Velveteen Rabbit was a toy rabbit who wished that he would become real. And he didn't become real until he was tattered, until he was torn, until he had been used, until he had been loved, and just was kind of worn out. And that is what caused him eventually to be real. And so I call, what is talked about quite a bit is authenticity as being real, because it's an acknowledgement that we are the culmination of our vulnerabilities, of our experiences, of our failures, of our successes, of our mistakes, and that really we wear that in everything we do. And we should certainly bring that to the professional landscape, but also to leadership, and really not shy away from those failures, weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and the like. So simply put, it's being open, honest, and genuine with ourselves and with others. And why is it important? It supports contentment and well-being, firstly, our own, which is so important as leaders. I have found that as a leader, I'm often worried about my team. How's my team doing? Do I have my team's back? But it's so important, particularly for us as women leaders, to support our own contentment and our own well-being. So being authentic is important because it supports our personal and professional contentment and well-being, and then in turn encourages others to be authentic, which then in turn promotes open and honest communication. And it's actually found that when teams feel that they can be authentic, it actually makes difficult conversations, which frankly are inevitable, in the workforce and certainly in leadership, go more easily, because again, there's that culture, there's that tone of open and honest communication, and that transparency generally. And then how do you ensure that you're being real and being authentic? Express your opinions and express them unapologetically. And that is not to say that, you're brash or that you're obnoxious or that you're arrogant, some of the things the panelists talked about in terms of wanting to avoid, but it's that you yourself feel empowered to express your voice in a way that's authentic to you, which again, in turn becomes infectious and promotes that culture of empowerment to be real and be authentic. Listen to others, but trust your intuition. And then also, again, going back to this notion of the Velveteen Rabbit, accept your vulnerabilities and understand that you're bringing everything, the whole package, kit and caboodle of who you are to your leadership and to your professional life. So next up, knowing your value system. And what exactly is this? In my view, this is aligning to I say 5, but it can be however many that are near and dear to your heart, to the 5 values that are most important to you. So your North Star, how you ground yourself. And this is important, particularly in times of challenge, whether it's personal or professional for that matter. It helps you weather the storm. It brings you back to what's important to you. It helps you center yourself. It can help you develop a mantra that you say internally before a presentation or a difficult conversation, or dealing with a difficult situation, again, to help ground you in times of challenge. It also sets the tone for an organizational culture. So it sets the expectation for how you want to be treated as a colleague, as a peer, as a leader. And it sets the tone for how you want your organization and your team to operate. And then finally, it helps you prioritize your time and energy. Knowing your personal and professional value system just helps you figure out where to spend your time. As women leaders, we're high achieving, we're all very busy. We're mothers, we're wives, we're spouses, we're friends, we're daughters. And knowing that having that value system as your anchor helps you prioritize your time, both at work and in your life. And then how do you do that? Firstly, identify your core values. Several years ago, I had a deck of cards, each of which had a key value on it. Maybe it was a deck of something like 50 plus cards, and actually went through the exercise of trying to whittle down, starting with my 25 core values, then my 15 core values, then 10, then 5, until I got to a kind of manageable number. So go through that exercise of identifying your core values, and it might seem like a daunting exercise at first, but you may find that it's easier than you think, frankly, because you already are living your values. It's just about the recognition and the identification of those core values. And then develop operating values for your organization. They don't necessarily have to be the same as your personal values, but again, just the exercise of saying, team, this is how I want you to operate. Leaders in my organization, this is the expectation that I have of you in terms of how you operate with your respective teams. Having some kind of standard that you rally your team around is just, I've found is just so important. And then finally, hold yourself and your team accountable to adhering to those values. So Lisa talked really eloquently about leading with empathy, and I've just added to this leading with compassion. And so the distinction I want to make is in this first bullet here under the what, empathy I consider to be the act of putting yourself in someone else's problem to bridge a gap in understanding. And Lisa defined it almost identically, so I know it's right. Obviously important, as Lisa talked about, to make sure that your team knows that you're making that effort to understand where they're coming from and bridging that gap in understanding. But then taking it a step further, leading with compassion, which is now that you understand where your team is at, having that willingness to alleviate their problem, to alleviate someone else's suffering. So not just stopping at empathy. And why is this important? Fosters trust within an organization, trust with your direct reports, but then also creates a culture of collaboration and unity. So when you, as leaders, lead with empathy and compassion, it inspires the people on your team to do the same, to treat each other with empathy and compassion, to lead their respective teams with empathy and compassion. And then finally encourages thriving, not just surviving. And, to me, especially with all the burnout that we're finding in the workforce these days, with all the burnout that we're finding as a result of the pandemic, as a result of working parents being pulled in so many different directions, encouraging thriving is just essential, really. It wards off attrition and it supports contentment in your team. And then how do you ensure that you're leading with empathy and compassion? Lisa mentioned listen. Sometimes as kind of driven leaders, there's that inclination to step in and do. What is the action? Solve the problem right off the bat. But so much of empathy is just listening, giving someone voice to express their frustrations, to express what's going on with them, to vent, to share. And so first step, and really I think probably the most meaningful one is listening. And then having listened, you can ask in an informed way, what do you need? What can I do? How can I help? And linked to that is really coaching and developing your team to find their own solutions. So, brainstorming along with your team, how to arrive at the solution, how involved you as a leader should be. Sometimes they need an escalation point, in which case I will step in and talk to my counterpart or escalate the issue as appropriate. Sometimes they just need help figuring out what to do so that they can be the solvers of their own problems. So really striking that balance and using your intuition and your judgment to determine which path to take depending on the situation. So kind of along those lines, being a collaborative problem solver. Again, leading is not simply telling somebody what to do. I think we know it's actually, we're professional problem solvers. That's what I feel I do most days of the week. And so what is it? It's resolving problems creatively, strategically, and collaboratively. And why is it important? It supports confidence and optimism, again, your own as well as your team's. It encourages teamwork and collaboration, and it can help anticipate big problems before before they happen. If you're problem solving for little problems and get into the practice of building that muscle, both for yourself as a leader and your team, you then help anticipate the bigger problems before they become really problematic. And so how do you do that? Brainstorm solutions with your team and coach your leaders to do the same, and then just be open to various paths forward to achieving a solution. Finally, promoting a culture of recognition. And again, this does not necessarily mean, it can certainly, but it doesn't necessarily mean, promotions, raises, equity. It's really finding creative ways to show appreciation for the efforts, ideas, and work product of your team. And why is this important? For all the reasons you would think, right? We all, I think people generally are fueled by being recognized for what they do. And so this can support job satisfaction, it can ward off attrition, it improves work performance and sets expectations, and then it encourages others to find and develop their superpower. When people feel that they're being recognized for what they do, they start to see a pattern that I get recognized when I use this superpower of mine or use this strength of mine, and it makes them want to use it even more. And then how do you do that? Give verbal specific feedback. And I can't emphasize specific enough. I think one of the most discouraging performance reviews I ever received said, "You're doing a great job." That's what my leader said, "You're doing a great job." And that was pretty much the end of it. And you would think that, that would have been encouraging, but it was actually more demoralizing than I would have even thought before that happened, because it didn't acknowledge any specifics whatsoever. What had I done that was so great? What was my career trajectory as a result of having done some great thing? And so can't emphasize enough, give verbal specific feedback, spotlight team members' accomplishments. And there are a lot of opportunities to do this. You can send an email, you could do it in your instant messaging, you can do it at a team event or a team meeting, but definitely spotlight team members' accomplishments, because it, again, highlights in a very public way what the expectation of work product, of behavior is on a team. And then show appreciation through key gestures or events. It can be a mug, it can be a team sweatshirt, it can be a gift basket. Kelly mentioned some of the things that she does for her new hires. These are the kinds of creative ways that we can promote a culture of recognition in a way that's just really to our own benefit as leaders and to the benefit of our teams. So to wrap up, 5 key themes: be real, so authenticity, know your value system, lead with empathy and compassion, be a collaborative problem solver, and finally promote a culture of recognition. And just to share some final thoughts on the next slide, I have a quote from Sheryl Sandberg that I think is so important about leadership and how to really make impact as a leader. And that is, leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence and making sure that that impact lasts in your absence. So again, it's about kind of, raising the level of performance on your team and making an impact that will be lasting and sustaining even after you've gone. Thank you.
Hey, my friend, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, be sure to rate, review, and share your biggest takeaway. And if you're wanting more, you can access hundreds of recent speakers, book summaries, great articles, and more at no additional charge through your membership portal. You can also get involved in a Women Leaders Association mastermind group or networking group near you. Or if you just need to access your membership portal, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com to be connected. Because here at Women Leaders Association, we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. That's all for today, my friends. Bye for now.